Today, we're looking at something absolutely staggering. We're going to examine the incredibly secretive dynasty behind one of the world's largest, yet kind of most invisible financial institutions. This is an empire that operates quietly right in the background of everyday American life. It's outlasted governments, recessions, and literally every competitor that has tried to take it down. But before we get into the history of it all, I want you to ask yourself a question. Who really controls your 401k? Seriously, when you put your hard-earned retirement savings into an account, who's actually pulling the strings? Because, spoiler alert, the answer isn't some faceless algorithm or a publicly accountable board of directors. It's a single, private family. And just wrap your head around the scale we're talking about here. $18 trillion. That is Fidelity's total footprint. We're talking $7.1 trillion in discretionary assets and another $11 trillion in administered assets. To put that into perspective for you, that is more than the GDP of every single country on Earth except for the US and China. Just massive. Which brings us to Section 1, the $18 trillion secret. How exactly does a company valued at $107 billion operate with absolutely zero public accountability? Well, let's bring those massive numbers right back down to reality for a second. 1 out of every 5 American adults relies on this single private family for their financial future. So how on earth did they build this? That takes us to Section 2, building the Fidelity Dynasty. Let's see how this family recognized the strategic value of market trends to build their empire from the ground up. Okay, way back in 1946, investing was basically just a game for the rich. But Edward Crosby Johnson II spotted a huge trend, the rising American middle class. He started it all by turning a small fund into Fidelity Management and Research, and he drove it with real, hard data. Over 79 years, this evolved across 3 generations. His son ended up creating the Magellan Fund, and after Peter Lynch's historic run, we eventually see Abigail Johnson taking the reins as CEO in 2014. Now, get a load of this number, 29.2%. That is the average annual return Peter Lynch delivered for 13 years straight, from 1977 to 1990. It is literally the best performing mutual fund in history over a period that long. If you had invested $10,000, it would have turned into $280,000. Lynch totally understood the strategic value of tracking consumer trends. His whole philosophy was simple: invest in what you know. He bought Dunkin' Donuts because he ate there. He bought Toys R Us because his kids shopped there. Fidelity wasn't just selling funds, they were selling the dream that regular, everyday people could beat Wall Street. And because of that, their assets exploded from $20 billion to over $500 billion. But as we know, absolute power rarely comes without some conflict. Which brings us to Section 3, a family civil war. Let's look at the high drama in 2005 that nearly destroyed this incredibly successful dynasty from the inside out. I quit. Abigail Johnson, the granddaughter of the founder who had been groomed for this her entire life, got an MBA from Harvard and was already running the asset management division, was suddenly facing a demotion. Her father, Ned, just didn't think she was ready. So he sends a board trustee to her house on a Sunday morning to sideline her over to the family's charitable foundation. And she didn't cry, she didn't beg. The heir to a $100 billion empire looked right at the messenger and simply said, "I quit." The absolute strategic brilliance of Abigail's move here is wild. She completely called her father's bluff. She knew, for a fact, that if she left, there was zero backup plan. No other family member was ready to take over. Fidelity would have to be sold off to some Wall Street bank, and the family's control would just vanish forever. So, Ned blinked. He actually told his deputy that if he didn't fix this mess, his wife would kill him. Abigail ended up getting control of the workplace benefits business instead, fixed its problems, and eventually became CEO. She basically saved the dynasty by beating her dad at his own game. And holding on to that absolute control is absolutely crucial, because what the Johnsons oversee is way, way more than just mutual funds. Section 4, the hidden empires. We really need to peel back the layers here and look at what they run entirely behind the scenes. Here is how the power dynamic actually shakes out. The Johnson family controls roughly 49% of Fidelity. Abigail holds 29%, and her brother Edward IV holds nearly 10%. Now, the other 51% is split among 108 current and former executives. But make no mistake about it, with a 49% unified voting bloc, the Johnson family is absolutely calling the shots. And what exactly do they do with all that power? Just look at this astonishing variety of assets. They aren't just a financial services company. Edward IV runs Pembroke Real Estate. managing 6.5 million square feet of property, which includes the massive Boston seaport. They own Northern Neck investors, holding lumber, oil, even hydroponic tomato farms. They've got Boston Coach Transportation, venture capital, and recognizing the strategic value of modern tech trends, Abigail has heavily embraced crypto, offering institutional custody for Bitcoin and Ether. But what's truly wild is the closed-loop nature of all this. Fidelity investors trust the Johnsons with their retirement savings, and the Johnsons turn around and invest that money right back into their own private family real estate projects. But the empire's reach doesn't stop at the American border. Enter the Bermuda Connection. Back in 1969, Fidelity created an entity to serve non-U.S. markets, which eventually got spun off. And where did they register it? Bermuda, a notorious tax haven with zero corporate taxes, operating totally outside of U.S. regulatory oversight. And get this, the Johnson family owns nearly 40% of this $217 billion Bermuda company, which leads to staggering, mind-bending numbers like this. During a tax restructuring in 2006 and 2007, shareholders received subordinated debentures as payment for terminated shares. The four Johnson family members walked away with a payout of $2.9 billion in a single transaction. Now, to be clear, the sources aren't saying anyone did anything illegal here, but they do highlight that this family built a parallel financial system that generates billions in profits that are completely inaccessible to 99.9% of everyday Americans. So why does any of this actually matter to you? Well, that brings us to our final section, the cost of secrecy. What is the real, tangible danger when an $18 trillion empire has zero public accountability? Let's look at this stark comparison from just recently in 2024. Fidelity suffered a data breach. It exposed the personal information, we're talking social security numbers, driver's licenses, of 77,000 customers. The breach happened in August, but they didn't even tell their customers until October. And the penalty for this? A $2.5 million settlement. Guys, for a private company valued at $107 billion, that is the financial equivalent of getting fined a single penny for stealing a car. It's nothing. But honestly, it goes a lot deeper than data breaches. Also in 2024, a massive whistleblower lawsuit dropped. A former Fidelity financial advisor named Michael Maker claimed the company was pressuring its advisors to sell high-fee, completely unsuitable investments to everyday customers. Allegedly, Fidelity divided their products into tiers. Safe stuff, like treasuries, were Tier 1. High-risk stuff, like options and alternatives, were Tier 3. And according to the lawsuit, those Tier 3 products paid out 10 times the commission. Managers were allegedly getting compensated based on pushing customer assets right into those high-risk tiers. And what happened to the whistleblower? Well, Maker says he was fired for reporting these violations. He literally claims he was fired for trying to protect his customers. Now, Fidelity denied everything, calling the allegations baseless. But for critics, this lawsuit paints a really dark contrast between that friendly, approachable public image Fidelity projects and the ruthless, profit-driven corporate reality that's allegedly happening behind closed doors. So, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. For 79 years, 3 generations of a single family have built an invisible, basically invincible empire. They have masterfully capitalized on every strategic market trend, survived every crisis, and amassed unimaginable wealth, all while keeping the public largely in the dark. So the very next time you log in to check your retirement balance, ask yourself, behind that friendly green logo and the promise of a secure retirement, is a $107 billion dynasty owning your future while you aren't even looking?